Good morning, everybody. Could I invite the people who are sitting way in the back, unless they really want to read their newspapers, to come to the front? I first want to express my sincere condolences to the Irish. The figure 5 cannot be mentioned today in any speech. I already told some of you that basically the Dutch can sympathize with the Irish a lot. Our plight was more or less the same. But anyway, congratulations to the Danes. So that's, I think, welcome back, everybody. I had a lot of very nice conversations over the drinks yesterday evening. Also experiencing again that the real force of change is actually there. This is you, a lot of very good people who are here gathered to make this thing work and move. So it's all action, as we said yesterday. It's a call for action and implementation. A lot of good ideas, but you know, we can talk endlessly, but it's very important that we're going to move together. Now, the plenary panel this morning will focus very much on the role of education. And not just education in terms of, well, what curricula, etc., but basically, how do we get the right education, the right people in the right jobs, the right place at the right time? This is what we're going to talk about. Now, before we're going to start the official panel and the discussion, I want to have a few household notes, housekeeping. Switch off your mobile phones, unless you're on emergency call. Take note of the emergency exit. Oh yeah, we have to do that all the time. There's one there, there's one there, there's one there, and there's one there. In case of fire, unless you're a pyroman, leave the building. Leave your presentations, the speakers with the technicians. Wear your name badges when you enter the place. You saw there was already this friendly guard. The Irish are very friendly. You know, the police even is very friendly. So they let you through if you smile the right way, but it's more important to wear the badge. Posters. You saw already there will be posters displayed in Hall 3 during the lunch. And also we have a new, this was one of the people came up to me yesterday and said, there are many questions in the audience. So we have a wall now in the marketplace where for the next panels, people can already prick up questions. If they have urgent things they want to discuss in these panels, just prick up your questions and we'll take note. Track sessions, oral presentations are taking place in the Dodder rooms, A and B, in Hall 6, in the Marion room and in the Minerva room. So these are the track sessions following this opening panel. And you find it indicated, all these places. I mean, out of the registration to the left is all the Dodder rooms. Many of you have already been here a few days, so by now you know your way around. Otherwise, look at somebody who acts as if they have been here long enough, and they can tell you where these places are. The lunch you can collect from Hall 3 before attending a lunchtime session. And of course, in the evening, we have a few interesting events. There is the Network Publications launch, WHO, in Hall 3 from 7 o'clock till 8:30. And there's several other interesting presentations that you will see that will take place during the day, launches of books, etc. So we're very, very happy that it's actually turning into a real dynamic crowd now. And I would like to ask, there's channels also for translation. So can the channels be put up, or have they been put up already? So you see here in the back projected, so if you're not a native speaker of English, like personally I also am not, which you can hear probably, we are forced to all speak English, but there's the other languages translated and the channels are indicated here. Yes, if all this is clear, and I can't seduce more people to come to the front, we're going to start without further ado. Yesterday we had the OECD message from Dr. Goria, which for some technical reason could not be projected then, but we allow him the time to speak to us now by video. So the OECD message of welcome by Dr. Goria.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to address the Global Forum on Human Resources for Health. This is focusing on building the health workforce of the future. And it comes at a critical time in building that health workforce that we need for tomorrow. So I'd like to congratulate all the health workers here today. Without you, important vaccines wouldn't be administered, advances in surgery wouldn't happen, frail elderly people would not have the health care they need and the quality of life they need, which is really what it's all about. But it is also important to recognize that there are still many millions of people around the world who do not have proper access to health care. Last year, I was privileged to serve on the High-Level Commission on Health, Employment, and Economic Growth. The work of the Commission showed that health is an investment, not a financial burden. In fact, around 1/4 of economic growth between the years 2000 and 2011, this is for low and middle income countries, is estimated to have resulted from improved health. I mean, you're talking a massive input into development, into well-being. To build on this work, last May, we launched, together with the World Health Organization and the ILO, the International Labor Organization, a 5-year action plan, which we called it Working for Health. Now, this plan will help countries implement the Commission's 10 ambitious recommendations, focusing on areas from creating decent health sector jobs, maximizing women's economic participation, or scaling up education and lifelong learning. In short, the action plan aims to ensure that the world has the right number of jobs for health workers with the right skills in the right places. And by the way, this is crucial because you normally have a lot of the supply coming to the places where it is perhaps least needed. All this in order to deliver universal health coverage and other sustainable development goals, because when you're talking about health, it's not just about health that we are discussing. It's really a number of other of the sustainable development goals associated with good health outcomes. I'm pleased to note that all 194 member countries of the World Health Organization have endorsed the Working for Health 5-year action plan. And as we emphasized at the UN General Assembly only 2 months ago with Dr. Tedros, the head of the WHO, delivering on the action plan will contribute to achieving the SDG number 3 target, the Sustainable Development Goal target number 3 of universal health coverage. We're talking about 2030. Remember, this is the 2030 agenda. And the goal number 3 with the number of targets in it is about getting universal health coverage by that date. So we're now working with the WHO, with the ILO, to make the action plan a reality and helping countries scale up the supply of skilled health workers, to encourage investment in jobs, ensure working conditions that attract and retain health workers, and also to ensure that international flows of health workers are mutually beneficial. Avoid the some of the manifestations of brain drain, which then literally leave some of the communities in developing countries without the necessary workforce on the health side because they've gone elsewhere to another country that offered better conditions. The UN Multi-Partner Trust Fund that we're launching this week aims to catalyze these actions. And I hope all of you here today will encourage potential donors and investors to rise to the challenge and make the necessary resources available. Now, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, a better and more efficient health workforce will lead to more sustainable, inclusive economies. Ultimately, it will lead to better lives. So let us make the most of this global forum to take our joint work forward. And more importantly, to come closer to a world where everybody has access to the health care and the health workers they need and they deserve. Thank you.
We'll pass on the good thanks to Dr. Correa for this opening message, and also apologies to our OECD colleagues, but they had a secured line yesterday, so even from here we could not get into the message earlier. But here it is, and here it was, and thank you so much. I would like to invite our guests of this morning onto the stage. I'll just now mention them by name. And then I'll do a little round to see who else is in the audience that is appassionado about education. But can I call up Dr. I'm going to pronounce it the Greek way now, Yorgos Sigounas. He's one of the chief administrators at the U.S. Department of Health, Human Services, Health Resources and Service Administration. Now this is a long name, but we're very, very happy. So one applause for Dr. Sigounas. I also like to call up, welcome, if you could maybe take that seat, thank you so much. Dr. Martinho Dgedge from Mozambique, General Inspector of Health at the Ministry of Health. Warm applause for a colleague from Mozambique. We have Dr. Vandine of Cambodia, Director General for Health. Very, very appreciative that you're here, actually, all the way from Cambodia. An applause for her. Our fourth guest is Dr. Krisada Sawaengdee from Thailand. She's advisor to the Ministry of Health of her beautiful country, Thailand. Welcome. And finally, Dr. Ryan Tandjung from Switzerland. He is the head of the health workforce profession, so he will be seated there. Yes, great. Now, our honorable guests will be listening to my quick round because I promised them, we discussed this a little bit. I said, I'm going to check who is in the audience. So we're going to quickly do the rounds so that they can see who is actually facing them. So basically, at this stage, I would love to hear who at 8:50 in the morning feels that he or she is appassionado about education. Oh, this is too many to all tackle now. There's a lot of passionados in the room. Can I give quick hands? Okay, passionados. Of these passionados, basically, who says, I'm actually an educator myself, I'm in the educational system. I teach, I train, I'm an educator. Who says, well, I'm not in the educational system, but I'm an educator nonetheless? Yeah? Now, who says, I have a very, very burning question, which should be posed now, and cannot wait till half an hour from now? Because, you know, we want people to breathe about 16 times per minute. That's the normal breathing rate. So if you breathe faster because you're hyperventilating, this is not very healthy, since we're health people. So everybody can wait half an hour for their burning question. I'm happy for that, because that saves us time. So then I can move back to... I have to tell you, one of the privileges of being in the role I'm currently in is to actually meet with fantastic people. We have malus points for telephones. So you have to do a dance later or something. Anyway, telephones, if you can turn them on silent, that would be really great. No, one of the privileges of being amongst people like this is I had the privilege to read more details about their CVs. And all the people here present are absolute passionados about the subject of this morning. They have been in the health arena for a long time. They've worked their way as practitioners through a lot of things. And they're both educators, administrators, so they've seen the system from many, many different sides, which I think is very good for this topic. Because we can all say education is important, but you know, that doesn't help us very much to move on. So you know in what arenas the education actually takes place and what we need to do to get the right skills in the right place at the right time. So I want to give you also a little bit of the flavor of who is here. And so the first question will not be very much a sort of official question, but basically about people's sense of why they're in this arena. Now, I'll start with Dr. Yorgos Sigounas, because he has to, unfortunately, leave us by about 9:35 to catch a plane. So he's not going to storm off the stage in anger, but he's basically scheduled to leave, and we're very happy that you actually could make it to this panel. So I'll start with you. When I read your CV, Dr. Sigounas has been very much involved with cellular biology. He has set up bone marrow transplant units. So I thought, how does somebody with that sort of expertise and background end up in human resources and education? Now, I saw that you also had been a professor of medicine at one of the colleges in the US. So how did you transit from where you were to where you are now? And just to give us a sense of why, because you were very passionate about that change.
Yes. First, I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to be with this wonderful panel here and with this orange here, which are wonderful. And I enjoyed very much the couple of days which I have been in this meeting. I learned a lot. Actually, I was born in Greece, and then I moved to the United States for graduate studies. I worked for the National Institutes of Health and the Naval Medical Center for a few years. And then I was recruited to help with establishment of the bone marrow transplantation at the Broad School of Medicine, which is located in Greenville, North Carolina, a very rural area. When I left from Washington, D.C. to go to that place, when I left the highway, the only thing which I was seeing for about 45 miles, there were tobacco farms and corn farms. So this school actually was located in the middle of a very rural area and underserved area which there were not many providers. So although I started with more specialized area of work, the working in bone marrow transplantation, I felt in love with the mission of that school. That school was actually established 40 years ago, and the primary mission was to produce primary healthcare providers, providers who will serve underserved areas and rural areas, and will stay there and practice medicine. And that exactly happened. I mean, the statistics which we have today is that 42% of those individuals, the graduates, our graduates there, are primary healthcare providers. And 5%, they practice rural medicine. So many of my colleagues and friends, they were just that, primary care physicians, family physicians. So then I dealt with training residents, mostly in these residents were trained in primary care. Of course, I was a professor in medicine, internal medicine, the hematology-oncology division for 23, 24 years. So I had to also deal with the training of hematologists in addition to internal medicine and other subspecialties there. But the mission of this school was something which really I loved. So given the opportunity to move to the Health Resources and Service Administration, which is an agency of the US Department of Health and Human Services, I decided to go there. Why I decided to go there? Because HRSA, or otherwise is abbreviated, has exactly the same mission: to support underserved people, to support people without insurance. So we hear about uninsured individuals in the United States. I can tell you that HRSA oversees 10,400 clinics throughout the United States. And the goal and the mission of those clinics are to see uninsured, underinsured, poor people. Everybody can walk through those doors and be seen by a provider and taken to have high-quality health care service. So that's why I ended up there.
Again, people in the back row, you cannot see, maybe on the screen you can see a little bit, but I always love to see when people really get passionate and you can see the link very much on your face, you know, the connection between what you were doing before and what you're doing now at a sort of scale of tens of billions per year, but it started very much in where you were teaching and where you were working before. So I'll move to your neighbor. Again, I felt very privileged to read your biography. Dr. Vandine, now Director General of the Health of the Royal Government of Cambodia. But she also started in '79 already in the health system, and was a nurse first, then a midwife, then a physician. Then she was the first Cambodian woman who got the Fulbright grant to Yale University. She did her Masters of Public Health there. She moved back. She set up, you're a real builder, what I saw in the... So tell a little bit about where your passion is, because I could see it already in your trajectory through life, but why do you feel it's so important to work on education and on the health workforces?
Yes. So first of all, I would like to express my deep appreciation for the opportunity provided as a panelist for this very interesting topic this morning. I don't know how many people you know about Cambodia, and we have been going through a very difficult life through the period of the genocide regime. And although at that time I was very young, but I'm the one among other survivors from the genocide regime in 1979 after liberation. So immediately right after, I feel that a lot of people at that time fell sick, and they need a lot of care and support. And I volunteered immediately, although I'm still young, and to work as the volunteer, and at the same time to engage in a very first 1-year special training program that established by the government at that time to have a number of health workforce to serve the population. As you may know that most of the people killed and the survival, especially for the health professional and particularly for the medical doctor, they survive from that time only 28. So we start from the 28, and the 28 they start to run the education in Cambodia, including the special 1-year training program for the nurse. And at the same time, we have to learn the mixed skill. Okay? So not only nurse, but we have to serve as a midwife and also provide the immunization program to our population. And later on, in 1980, we start the first generation of the physician. We have only 7 physicians graduated at that time. We collected all the people who used to be the medical student before the genocide regime, and then they had to have a special training program to be fast trained, and then those become a teacher and professor to conduct further training program. And until now, we start from 28. Until now, we have more than 23,000 of the health professionals in the country. So in throughout my career, when I start as the primary nurse and practice as the midwife, and then move on to pursue my medical degree, medical doctor degree, and in the later stage to pursue my master degree of public health, I feel that it's very important to really learn from what we have and the experience that we had, and then move on with the evolution of the society as well as the need of the country. And sometimes I may ask myself that whether the position that offered to me it's really in the right skill and in the right place, because sometimes, you know, I do not really have the experience for that particular skill, but I need to really engage in order to come up with something, and then try to help the government as well as to reform the system, to get things set up in order to roll the system. So it's quite dramatic increasing the number of health workforce as well as to, because you know, if you talk about the health workforce, we have to look at the 3 different triangles, because this triangle I created, and I think it cannot be disconnected. You know, if you build only the health workforce, and then you neglect about providing the means for the health workforce to perform, as well as forget about the community participation, as well as the society knowledge to utilize the health services, I think the health workforce cannot do anything. You know, you have the skill, but then you don't have. This is happening in the 1980s in Cambodia. You have some health workforce, but then they cannot really deliver the services because there is no infrastructure, there is no equipment for the health workforce to perform. And then the population cannot access to the healthcare services because of the security, because of the road, because of so many factors that involved. So that's why, for me, I feel that very important to have these 3 triangles: health workforce and skill development, infrastructure and equipment and supply, And then the community participation, including the social knowledge. And these three has to be together that we can serve the services better. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. What I love very much is in your own biography, this is very, very linked. You worked on the infrastructure, you worked on the skills, and now here you are telling about all that experience. I'm turning to Dr. Krisada. She had a very nice statement prepared. We were discussing the fact that all of us are non-native speakers of English. So she said she wanted to apologize for her English, but I'm still going to ask you that question that I asked everybody else, because you also, I mean, if I look, you're now an advisor to the Minister of Public Health, but in your background, you've worked on population and development, you've worked on the International Health Policy Program, you've worked on longitudinal studies on the health professional workforce in Thailand. So in your own biography, this thing about education and linking education to building the workforce is, in every step of your career, it has been there. So tell a little bit about your passion at this moment for the topic of education, just in a few words, and then we'll move to the rest of the questions of this panel.
Thank you, Dr. Golib. First of all, I would like to thank the organizing committee to providing my opportunity to share Thailand experience today. For me now, I'm advisor of Ministry of Public Health, and I'm a nurse by profession. And also I am a researcher and principal investigator of Thai nurse cohort study. It's the first longitudinal study of professional in Thailand. And we found a lot of data to contribute to workforce planning, such as we found that Thai nurse workforce participation in health service changed over time. Baby boomer nurses have work lifespan longer than the Generation X, and Generation Y have only 10 years in nursing career. This is a workforce dynamic, and it is important for health workforce planner to consider about attrition or consider our workforce planning to indicate how to produce nurse or physician to supply for our health system. And also, I'm very proud that I'm Vice President of Thailand Nursing Council by election. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks very much. Thank you. I'm staying on this side of the panel, Dr. Dgedge Martinho. In Mozambique, we've heard already in some of the side sessions over the last few days and also yesterday, Mozambique faces a lot of challenges in the health workforce and also in the education. So could you, from your personal, first, why are you now so passionate about this educational role? What is it for you in your country?
Yeah. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say thank you for inviting us to share our experience in this big meeting. Actually, I've been in this field of education since I was in the medical school. At that time, we didn't have so many teachers, so I was involved teaching the new ones. And since then, I've been teaching. After I was graduated, I teach in the nurse school, midwife school. Then I went to do my master and my PhD, and I was involved with the undergraduate teaching and postgraduate teaching. I was invited to be the Deputy Director of Human Resources for Training. So at that time, I was involved on developing materials, so I get passion for materials for nurses and midwives and other mid-level health staff. Now, I'm still involved, particularly with teaching the medical specialists in public health. So, I mean, I've been in this field for some time. That's why.
Thank you very much. I'm turning to my right-hand neighbor, you told me that for you, I mean, you've been doing a lot of research as well on the topics of professional education. And you're very much involved in your current function in the Swiss Federal Office with two of the main acts that deal with medical education as well and training of health professionals. So from that perspective and your own sort of personal career, where does your passion lie for the topic?
Well, I think first of all, it's important to have a good quality at the end of the patient, and one of the main points is how do we educate our future health workers? It's also in our own interest a bit. In Switzerland, we are actually facing a bit another problem. We're not really facing shortage. We're more likely are facing overdiagnosis, overtreatment, which is the same medal of the question, how good are our health workers educated? So I think to invest in a good education is a mainstay for any system change afterwards. Hopefully, the young people now educated at a really, really high level will change our system, will help to change our system. I don't think it's enough, but I think it's one of the main points. And to keep the people in the system will be also a major challenge afterwards.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to, in all the interventions, there is a link to education, but also many of you already say education is very important, it's crucial, but it's not enough. It's linked to all kinds of other things. Now, back to Dr. Sigounas. In the United States, you're currently in your role also to look at underserviced areas. Where do you feel at this moment are the trends, and how is your organization actually dealing with the educational challenges posed by particularly these areas in the United States where you feel there's underservice?
Actually, we are focused in 3 areas regarding the workforce in the United States, and also to make sure that all areas, underserved areas, rural areas, poor people, uninsured people, rich people have access to quality of health care. And to do that, we try, there are 3 factors actually which play important role. What we call HIPSA areas, which is health professionals shortage areas, the maldistribution of the different specialties and professionals. And the third, of course, is education and training. So we are trying to address all those 3 areas by first identifying what areas actually they don't have enough providers. So if they don't have enough providers, how we can put providers in those areas. And we do have programs. We have a major program in our agency, which is called the National Health Service Corps. And this program actually has about 12.5 thousand providers, about 8,000, 9,000 physicians, and then we have nurses, and then we have PAs, and we have all the allied health professionals. Dentists we have in that program. So what we do with that program? We pay the loans which these individuals have, the educational loans, with the agreement that these individuals, they will go and they will spend 2 years in those underserved areas. And then we have found that the statistics which we have today, 2 years after they finish the program, about 97% of the physicians stay and practice there, primary health care, mostly. And about 87 of the nurses stay there and they practice medicine. So that way is win-win situation. They get rid of some of the loans. We provide service to the underserved areas, rural or urban areas.
But from the perspective of your administration and your organization, when people outside the United States think about the United States, they think a few things. They think, first of all, you have some of the best medical schools, but you also have places where, you know, the medical schools might be not the same level. You have areas that are very affluent and where a lot of things are happening, a lot of innovation, and you have areas, like in other countries, that are a little bit more quiet and backward. You've touched on that already in your first intervention. So even in the US, you have the maldistribution that you touched on. There are people moving to the cities or the places where the money can be made. So with your programs, do you feel you're only scratching the surface? You have a lot of money, but it's also a big country. You feel you're scratching the surface, or you feel you're actually making a substantial impact on shifting the balance?
Actually, that was the reason which I moved from academia to the federal government. I was not planning to do that, but I saw their potential. I saw there that we have about 90 programs, which those 90 programs are focused in poor, uninsured, underinsured individuals. And, for instance, we try to target, because if we have a shortage in primary healthcare providers, then what do? You target the individuals from the undergrad medical education. Some people, they go even further to the undergrad education. You go to the undergrad medical education, and then you go to the residency programs. In addition to what I mentioned before about the National Health Service Corps, who are attending, so already finished. They finished their education. So we do have 2 GME programs, for instance, which we run. One of those programs is dealing with the teaching health community centers. So these individuals, these residents, they go and they get their training in those centers. So if you are trained in those centers, the health community centers, which they have, they are dealing with primary health care, then what you will do at the end, after you finish your 3 years, you will practice primary care. And then the medical students, again, I came from the Broad School of Medicine. Our focus was to produce primary care providers. And this is what we were doing. We were paying more attention to those individuals who would like to practice primary care. So these are the ways which actually you try to balance the shortage with the need and production. So we have, we have done very well, and always there is room for improvement, but this is the direction which we follow.
This is really the way to go. I'm looking at your neighbor while she's listening to you. Dr. Vandine, in your own country also, you said education is very important, but we need to think about some sort of integration of this education with other things. Could you elaborate a little bit more about what currently, also in light of the agenda we're discussing here, improving human resources in health, right jobs, right places, right time. Where are, in your country, the trends that you think are interesting and that might assist that agenda?
Yeah, you know, it's always very challenging when you start to move to build a health workforce from the scratch. Yeah. And right now, we have to look at how we implement our human resource policy, development plan policy. And we come in different stages when we move along. First, there is no really clear development plan for the human resource, but we base on the immediate need, then we produce the health workforce immediately to serve the population. But later on, when the evolution of the health sector move, then there is a need to see more strategically, to define and the focus on the, first, we focus on the quantity, in order to get a number of health professionals in place. So the first health workforce development plan was established at that time. And then 5 years, 6 years later, it has to go with the health sector reform, because we look at how we can reform the health sector in order to provide more quality of health services to our population. Then the human resource had to fit into this sector reform, and we focus on both the quality and quantity of the health workforce. And we should not forget that why the increasing number of the health workforce, it needs to have some sort of the regulation framework to govern the implementation as well as the practices of the health workforce. And currently we have the third human resource health workforce development plan, 2016 up to 2020. And this health workforce focus on the competency-based curricula, as well as to look at the strengthening of the pre-service training, and at the same time, why we focus on the pre-service training, then we have to look at how we can build the skill of our healthcare provider through the in-service training program, And for the pre-service training, we have to look at the different level of things to do. The first I mentioned is about the competency-based curricula, which is right now under the revision to really meet with the define more on the, as you may know that now we have the Sustainable Development Goal as well as the implementation of advancing the universal health coverage. And in Cambodia, we introduced some sort of we call H-Equip. It means that the Health Equity Fund to support all the poor population in Cambodia. They can have a free access to the healthcare services. So this project is quite interesting right now and quite popular. And we need more health workforce in order to serve and provide a quality of health services. And at the same time, we are advancing in order to introduce more health insurance to the other group of the population. So that's why the health services had to look at on how we strengthen ourselves at the same time when we advancing the universal health coverage as well as to reach the sustainable development goal. And
Dr. Vandine, can I interrupt you here? Because you sketch very nicely how the Cambodian government is thinking systematically about how to build an integrated perspective on education. At the same time, while I'm watching you, and I'm close to your, I can also see that with your experience, there must be a lot of challenges, because on paper this looks very beautiful. You have the in-service, you have the pre-service, you have the skill mix. This sounds very nice as a vision. Now, in a country coming out of the history that you described earlier, there must be all kinds of ways in which the nice order that you describe in practice is a bit more difficult.
Yes.
So now where do you feel, where should the effort be? Because we're all here as professionals working together to move this educational agenda to a good next stage. So where in the international discussion would you like to communicate with your colleagues here about these are the challenges?
You know, it's always when you're doing things, it's always challenge and opportunity. It come together. When you have a challenge, then you have an opportunity for the change.
You're a real diplomat, I can see that.
Yeah. So the challenge for us when we produce the health workforce, oftenly, I may put like this. One is the distribution of the health workforce, you know. Most of the health workforce, they don't want to go to the very remote area, sometime in the hard-to-reach population that they need to have the healthcare provider over there, but it's quite difficult to really...
So what in that case? I mean, we discussed...
in that case, we established the clear policy, so that's why the policy and regulation has to come along when we come up with that. So, for example, in my time, when I engaged in the as the medical doctor, at that time around in, in 1988, I graduated in 1988 as the medical doctor. At that time, the government employed all the graduates to distribute to the provinces, you know. But later on, there has been a policy, because otherwise most of the people want to be at the center, at the urban area, not to the suburban or even in the remote area. So they put the policy like before you enter into the medical school, so you have to indicate by yourself where you come from after your graduation, where you should go. So you have to indicate. So after graduation, immediately you have to go to that place. You cannot say no, you know, because you already committed that after graduation I have to go to that place. You know? Yeah. And until later stage, I think maybe beyond around 2010, no longer like that. And the health professional has to really apply for the job. I mean, they have to pass the how to say, enter into the civil servant, they have to pass the examination. And in that application, they have to indicate where they will apply for. Like, I want to go to this area, I want to go to this province, for example. And if you pass the examination, then you will serve in that particular area. So this is one of the challenges. And the other thing I want to say that the increasing number of the private school, private institution is dramatic in Cambodia now. Since they open the economy, then some people, they try to establish the private school, private medical school institution. So that it comes to our mind that we need to have the regulation in order to have some sort of ensuring the standard of the healthcare provider. So that's why we come with the curriculum, competency-based curricula. We have the pre-service, and the more importantly, the government of Cambodia established the national examination, both the entrance examination and exit examination. It's kind of national one. And it's led by the interministerial, not only the health sector, but it's composed of the Council of Ministers as well as the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education. And they have to some sort have at least the minimum standard before entering into the medical school or before exiting and to serve the population.
You put a lot of different measures in place at different levels to steer that process a little bit. I want to turn, I also am looking at the clock for Dr. Sigounas because his staff was already signaling that the private jet is waiting outside. No, I'm joking. But I know that he has to leave. So we'll break the order of the conversation a little to give him, before I give the Thai colleague the floor, because he has to leave in a minute. You've talked about your experience. You've talked about what your organization, currently your administration, is doing also to target underserviced areas, even in a country as rich as the United States. This happens. Now, yesterday, a lot of people said, the times are moving very quickly. So also for education, the dynamics are huge. Are we talking about the right thing here? The world might look very different in 10, 20 years from now. So are we training people for the right thing? So from your perspective of future, and we'll deal with that also with the other colleagues, from your future vision, how trends are going, how quickly things are moving. Are we training people in the right way for the right thing, for the right job at the right place? Or are we still a little bit in old frames here? So what is your perspective on that? You have been an educator. Do you feel we're doing the right thing in training?
I think we are in the right direction. Being flexible and trying to have systems and models which they will give you some understanding where things are going, I think is very important. So this is exactly what we are doing. We are trying to develop working models which will tell us what specialties we need, what models we have to use for healthcare, and how soon. For instance, we know that by 2024, in the United States, health profession jobs will be the top 19 jobs out of the 30 top jobs. So we know that we have a lot of demand there. We know also that the population is aging. So we do have to get ready to deal with those issues.
You're focusing, of course, in this, the huge country that your country is, you're focused on the United States. But when I see you talk about, for instance, different models, we're here in an international exchange.
Yes.
I think it's extremely important that all these experiences also are put on the table together and see, well, so from your modeling, do you feel that you could relate to some of the colleagues here and say, well, we are actually facing similar challenges?
A lot. I think because yesterday I was talking with people from Australia, I was talking with people from Europe, I was talking with people from Canada, and we were talking about rural areas. I don't see really huge difference in those rural areas, no matter if they are in the United States or if they are in Canada, if they are in Australia. The rural areas are rural areas, all right? They have special needs. They need special models. They need special approach. And I will tell you an example. We run, as I said before, the community health centers. The community health centers is a partnership between the federal government and the private sector, the local community, and the local and state governments. So we have the oversight of those clinics, and we make sure that these clinics are doing an excellent job. They provide quality of healthcare. Now, we know these clinics started as a purely primary healthcare clinics. Yeah, but we saw that there is a need there for behavioral health services. We integrated behavioral health services in those clinics. We saw that we have a substance abuse epidemic in the United States. We integrated the substance abuse treatment in those services. Oral health. Those centers now provide oral health. Some, they provide vision services. Women's health are provided by those centers. So we expand the services which are in need for these areas. So this is something, I think, a useful model to use and expand the services, expand the populations which you are covering, and also pay attention to the quality of health care you are providing. This is something which we do. And those centers, every 3 years, they compete for the licensing. They don't have for granted the licensing. So if someone else, a neighbor, does a better job, and I'm not doing a good job, this neighbor can come and compete for my spot. And they will take over the area.
I think Dr. Vandine is looking like I'm going to take over next minute, but thank you so much, Dr. Sigounas. Your staff is already almost sort of hyperventilating, so we need to get, you need to take your plate, but we want to thank you very much for being here, taking your time, because we know how pressed your agenda was. So one warm applause for at least one panelist who will leave us a little shortly.
Thank you again for having me here, and I wish you to have a great day.
On the way out, by the way, you can listen now to the interesting intervention on my left side here, because you have been patiently waiting, but I know with the sharing of this educational experience and educational models, I know that our Thai colleague, Dr. Krisada, has also prepared an intervention. She wants to stress lifelong learning, I understood. So the floor is now yours. To the same question, in your country, how do you feel that this education mix, the best skills, can be developed in the near future?
Okay, thank you. Around 50 years ago, Thailand faced with high mortality of maternal and child and severe shortage of health workforce in remote area. And the policy on rural recruitment, local training, and hometown placement for nurse and also compulsory work for medical graduates were implemented. These are effective measures at that time. But now, under socio-economic development and rapid increasing of and advancing of higher education, we have the past policy, it's weakening the past policy. But now, since the WHO guideline on scaling transformative health professional education was launched, there are several activities in Thailand which support transformation. In 2014, National Health Education Reform Commission was appointed by our Prime Minister. The members from professional councils, health service and education sector, both public and private, academia and health personnel, as well as civil societies. All partners put out the same level for understanding of global recommendation on transforming health professional education and committed to collectively drive for reform. And the Commission identified mutual goals for graduates. Our graduates are lifetime learners who have intrinsic value of human rights, social accountability, and ethical conduct. And also, they should competent in clinical, public health, and can address social determinants of health, and can communicate and work with each other from another profession and community. To achieve these goals, 4 priorities which useful and applicable for Thailand context for immediate reform were selected. The priorities are faculty development, interprofessional education, curriculum reform, accreditation, and continuous professional development. The Commission convenes an annual conference to discuss and commit to with different agenda. It keeps a momentum on transformative health professional education among key stakeholders, among all partners. And for the last 3 conference of National Education Conference, several countries from the WHO Southeast Asia region come to Thailand and had participated and benefit from the forum. In conclusion, in Thailand, resistance to change is not a question for Thailand. As all stakeholders are engaged and empowered through technical discussion, prioritization of recommendation to suit our context. Change were taken collectively by each professional group. And the national conference is platform for learning, sharing, updating progress to ensure that education produce adequate supply, appropriate skill mix, and motivated health workforce for our health system. Finally, my Minister of Public Health said, good university teach, but great university transform people. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that wisdom also at the end, because I think it's very important that education, of course, is not just going through some curriculum moves, it is a formation. And what we're talking about here also very much, and a lot of people reiterated this yesterday, times are changing so rapidly, and in education we're always thinking ahead. Are we preparing people for the right thing? And should we not be more, like what was said here, more flexible in introducing new formats, seeing what the trends are like? I'm turning to Dgedge Martinez, Dr. Dgedge. I know Mozambique a little bit, and I know the challenges that you're facing with your health workforce. Now, on the educational front, you have to be extremely creative, I guess. So where is the creativity of Mozambique going at this moment when you think about education?
Thank you very much. There is basic aspects that my colleagues from Cambodia and Thailand talk about competence-based adequate training, accreditation, the involvement of private schools. So this is about the right people to be trained. But the challenge is where to place them. So what we find is inequities in terms of distribution. So we will find that you have some areas with more people than others. So what we are doing now is to look at what are the people needs, what is the demand on those sites. And we have to get the data, particularly, for example, for HIV, looking at the demand in terms of treatment, the burden of the HIV in those areas, and try to allocate people according to the demand. Because most of the time, probably we have, the skewed curve of distribution of the people. We have another challenge about the time. You educate people, but you don't employ them, because you have a problem of financial money. So there is not enough budget to employ all the people that have been trained. So what we'll have so many people trained. The private schools are growing, and in a few years' time, you'll have so many people educated, but no money to employ them. The public sector doesn't have enough resources. We don't have a big private sector in Mozambique to employ, all of this stuff.
So can I interrupt you there? Because this has been a diagnosis that I remember also from my visits to your country, has been made very clearly by your government, that there is also a disconnect between you train people, you might even have more people trained at some point, but there's a disconnect with employment. So what do you do in your training thinking to actually deal with that issue of
Yes, actually, we, at the beginning, our idea was to expand the training institutions, to build more schools, to have even an accelerated plan of training. Since we have this fiscal constraint, now we have a plan based on that fiscal constraint where we are going to train people with more or less where we have the capacity to absorb them. Because if you train somebody, you finish the degree, and he stays at home 2 years, 3 years, and then he has the diploma, he asks to go back, he go and apply for the job. After 3 years, you don't know if he's still knowing what he has been trained. So probably we have to refresh them.
So what do you do in concrete terms? Because, the diagnosis is clear. You describe it very clearly.
Yeah.
So what do you do when you see that?
So at the moment, what we do, actually not much. What we do is try to, money is not there. So people are there. So what we are doing is in the future, not to train too many people in our schools. But as I said, the private schools are still there. They are growing because 10 years ago, health schools, you didn't have so many private health schools because it's quite difficult to build a private health school. Now we have so many. At that time, what was happening is you finish the degree, you are employed. You finish the degree, you are employed the day after. But now it's not possible to do that. So, and we are actually started this.
So I think we need to unpack
to develop
this
a little
much
bit
more,
more.
because basically, on the one hand, I've visited your beautiful country. In Maputo, there are a lot of people. Further up north, there are not so many people. So you have a shortage in certain regions of health workers of all kinds. You plan it nicely from the center. You try, but basically, what I see happen as an outsider visiting, talking to colleagues, they say exactly what you're saying. They say I was nicely educated, and there's shortages somewhere, but somehow I do not get employed. So how does this match? And what can you do to escape from this stranglehold? Because it seems to be a kind of deadlock.
Yeah, what we are going to do is to actually we have to advocate for more money. We have to advocate for more money. We have to use the health as an economic issue. Use to advocate for the politicians to allocate more money. Not in terms of human resource, but in terms of other, because you have to have infrastructure to employ people. So we have to look at the health as a whole and look at how can you get more financial finances to improve our health. And we are doing it. For example, this year, because of the financial constraints, health and education is one of the areas where the government is putting more money. So we are doing it, but at the same time, you have to have partners. We cannot do it alone. We have so many partners helping us, so they actually can build a system together. So it's not only the government, but this public-private partnership is very important for us, and we are learning how to do it in a better way. And that's the process that we have to look at it. So the challenge is to look at the quantity versus the quality. Because many times you have so many people, but when you go and look at the quality, so to balance the quantity and the quality is another issue.
Can I bring Ryan Tandjung in at this moment? Because you're struggling in Switzerland actually with something similar. I mean, not maybe the physical conditions that Dr. Dgedge is talking about, but you also struggle with people being trained, then where employed, the mismatch. And so in your earlier remarks, you talked about we have to be much more flexible, etc. Could you say a little bit more about how that plays out in Switzerland at the moment, and maybe relate to some of the other speakers?
Well, I think you talked about the distributional problem we have in similar countries too, like probably in Western countries, for the specialist generalist distribution, and the distribution problem between rural and urban, which is probably Switzerland has not that many really rural areas because Switzerland is so small. But the problem is how much can we steer by education to the system? I think it's very limited because first of all, educational system is quite conservative, and we need quite a lot of time to implement like our legislation we have. We are now, after 10, 12 years so far, that we can say the legislation has reached its goal. But now the students that finish medical school, they will have to go into residency, and they will be responsible for their own good and be chiefs of medicine within 10 and 15 years. So the lag time is really long. So I think we should say bye to a system where we think that the specialist title ensures that a doctor can do everything within his special field. every clinician knows that's not realistic anyway. So why do we need, from the legislation part, to think that the regulated specialist in cardiology is a specialist in cardiologic intervention, in rhythmology or something else? So what we basically need is a system that allows us to have a good basic framework at the basic education, have a good residency, and who knows whether we still need the several specialists within 30 years. But if they have a good backpack with them, they can change their field.
So if the lag time, and I think probably all the colleagues here will agree, when you train health workers, very often it takes a little while before they're trained, and it takes a little while before they can actually start practicing, and so you're already many years further. So the lag time, as you say, is rather long. Now, if flexibility should become the name of the game, what can you then do? I mean, should you train other people? Should you train lifelong learning, train later in life? Should you train for other skills? What should be the next stage out of this diagnosis? Because everybody shares, I think, that feeling that what you say, the educational system, per definition, tends to be a little conservative. So now,
I think one point that seems to be very important, and we are on the way in Switzerland to do this, is to appreciate technical and vocational training much more. Because what does it allow? It allows us to have a really low threshold to enter into the health service market. Of course, and I think the health service market has need of decent jobs. But the most important part is that if you enter health service market by vocational training, you should have a possibility to proceed in any professional activities. We have that for nurses in some amount, probably in a too small amount. We have it for obstetricians and starting to think about to have new roles. And this would actually allow us to have an early inflow of young people motivated to get into healthcare, and they're already ready by the age of 22 and not by the age of 35 with a medical specialist, and allows us to mix the skills a bit more.
Okay, so this thinking, the technical vocational education, which has a shorter sort of time frame, can be more flexible, but of course you have to then create spaces where people can practice and update their skills, etc. Would that work, Dr. Dgedge, would that work in Mozambique? Is your government considering something like that? Say, well, let's focus much more on the technical vocational type entry points for reasons of flexibility, for reasons of also flexibility later in the career patterns of these people. Is that a line along which you are thinking?
Yes, I think so. I think so that we are looking at technical aspects. We have in Mozambique what we call it a test to see if there is the willing of the students to do a health course. And based on that, we select the students. But what we are finding ourselves is that many times we train somebody to do one specific aspect in the real life. Because of what they see in the reality, they have to perform other areas that they were not trained for that. So we have to think about it. Should we train from the school what they have to do in the real life? But as my colleague said, the education is very conservative. If you say to a nurse school, we have to include some of the areas that the nurse is not used to train to do as a nurse, like diagnosis and treatment, but in real life they do diagnosis of HIV, they treat HIV patients. Should we train them at school before they leave or not? That's something that we have to discuss and agree on that. Because when they finish, actually, they do it. But we don't taught them at the school. We don't teach them at the school.
I'm going to do the following. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to apologize. I already did this yesterday, but with this whole sort of more intimate Q&A is a little bit difficult, so we do a lot in the track sessions for that. But the points, if I can summarize, out of the rich interventions on this panel, very much people try to focus, of course, first on their own national context, which might be quite diverse. Cambodia coming out of a long history of you had to rebuild the system, and you were very much implicated in that. Thailand also linking it to the rest of health system strengthening and lifelong learning. Our colleague from Switzerland saying that we have to start to become much more flexible given the dynamics. So even in education, we have to be much more flexible. And our colleague from Mozambique saying, well, we're struggling with huge issues in the human workforce, and we try to steer our education. Now, what I hear is a lot of good people that actually, if they would talk more to each other, a lot of these models and ideas could be exchanged very intelligently, and not copy-paste, but a lot of thinking, I think, could go into the exchanges, which we hope will happen in this panel. What I'll do is one quick round of final comments, takeaway messages, not questions anymore, but what some of the educational apasionados in this audience feel. So strong, short and sharp comments. I do one round and then we'll break for coffee. So I'll come down. The camera people have to excuse me. There are many people with educational passions here. So short comments. If you say, listening to this, where can we move together? Huh? Calls for actions. Yeah, I hold the mic.
I'll just use, because she would like me to translate quickly. She would like just to make a few comments. She's from Mozambique, but she would like to make a quick comment, please.
Bem, bom dia. Vais falar? Bom dia. Não, apenas comentar.
I would just like to talk a little bit about the training of technicians. During the independence period, we went for the training of technicians in different areas.
Just quickly, she would like to mention that Mozambique, just immediately after independence, had, were less doctors. They were really focusing on training mid-level technicians, especially on surgery.
And agora continuamos.
Now we have an institute of technicians of higher level, like anesthesiology, lab technicians, and radiology.
Training of specialized technicians, which could be, they have a high level institute which train specialized technicians, specifically for certain areas.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this is a further addition and comment to the Mozambican case, where mid-level technicians were trained as a response to the crisis. Yes.
Yes, again, Mozambique, but I just want to add the importance of providing the evidence, trying to triangulate the HRH data with the needs of the population. We just did it, for example, in Mozambique. We triangulate data of the HRH, the public health workforce, with the vulnerability of districts due to climate change. And we really see that there were really inequities in the distribution of the health workforce to address and to reduce the vulnerability and to be resilient to face the climate change issue in Mozambique. Thank you.
I want to link this to also a later panel. We're going to talk about optimizing the workforce and distribution as well. So I hope you'll be in that panel as well. Let me see hands. I do 1, 2, 3, and then we're really beg for coffee. Some people are already dehydrated and leaving.
I'm Marian Suba from Liberia, working for Chipago. I would like to thank the panel, and I really would like, if we don't take anything, we take the importance of pre-service education in terms of really helping people to provide the kind of quality service that they need. We need to emphasize that, and so because of that, we need to take all of those things into consideration of how we train them regardless of where they are, so that they will be able to respond to patients, whether they are in whatever location, whatever their religion, whatever their gender, or wherever their socioeconomic status. Thank you.
Great, a passionate appeal for pre-service education. I had one more, so that's the final two, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Jim Rourke from Canada, and thank you for pointing out, panel, for the importance of access to care in rural areas. And what we really need is an HRH plan for countries that includes a plan within a plan for how to produce the fit-for-purpose trained people for rural areas, which needs a separate planning, strong plan for itself.
Okay, here's a strong advocate, and here was somebody saying here, so you're already a team. The two of you, the rural emphasis, I think it's very important, and also over drinks yesterday, a lot of people were saying, please don't forget. Now we have not forgotten, I think, this morning, so thank you very much for that. Final remark, and maybe state your name first.
Yes, of course. So Miguel Cabral, a junior doctor in public health in Portugal, and I think that we perhaps can borrow a WHO motto from another topic, inequalities, to here, which is do something, do more, do better. And from the interventions, I think that now the part of doing better would be something to strive for now, at least from what I got. Thank you.
Thank you for that also upbeat reminder to all of us, doing things better. I think that is what we're all here for, I hope. There's very good coffee and tea, and I think also a very nice market outside. I want a thundering applause for our panelists. Dr. Vandine, Dr. Jufong, Dr. Dgedge, and Dr. Krisada. Thank you.